The neon lights of Nexus Station's lower levels cast everything in shades of electric blue and poisonous green, turning even the most innocent face into something sinister. In the depths of Sector 7, where legitimate businesses feared to tread, Nyx Valdris moved through the shadows like liquid darkness itself. Her reputation preceded her wherever she went. Whispered conversations fell silent. Hardened criminals stepped aside, and even the station's corrupt security forces found urgent business elsewhere. When they spotted her distinctive silhouette, she was beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful, all sharp edges and deadly purpose. Her skin held the pale luminescence of her homeworld Umbros, where twin black suns cast everything in perpetual twilight. Obsidian hair fell in precise waves to her shoulders, and her eyes were the color of fresh-blooded genetic modification that had earned her the moniker Crimson Shadow. Tonight, she wore her working clothes, form-fitting dark synth leather that moved like a second skin, designed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The Blue Nebula Cantina squatted like a metallic toad in the maze of maintenance corridors and black market shops. Its entrance was guarded by two Cronin bouncer, their 6 arms crossed in a display that warned off troublemakers. They stepped aside without a word as Nyx approached, their compound eyes tracking her movement with the nervous respect reserved for apex predators. Inside, the air was thick with narcotic smoke and the stench of a dozen different species packed too closely together. Holographic dancers gyrated on raised platforms while patrons nursed drinks that glowed with suspicious luminescence. Conversations died as Nyx passed, replaced by the careful silence of prey animals sensing danger. She found her contact in the private booth at the back, exactly as arranged. Torvin Gresh was a Sulistan information broker whose wrinkled gray skin and bulbous eyes gave him the appearance of a melted candle. His fingers, adorned with rings from a dozen different worlds, drummed nervously on the table as she slid into the seat across from him. The infamous Crimson Shadow, he wheezed, his voice like grinding metal. You're even more terrifying than they say. Nyx said nothing, simply fixing him with that unsettling crimson stare. In her experience, silence was often more effective than threats. People had a tendency to fill quiet spaces with their own fears. Torvin's drumming fingers stilled. Right, straight to business then. Your reputation for efficiency is well deserved. He slid a data pad across the table. The client is paying top credit enough to buy a small moon. All they want is one man eliminated. Human, civilian, shouldn't be any trouble for someone of your talents. Nyx picked up the pad, her expression unchanged as she studied the holographic image that materialized above it. The target was unremarkable, medium height, sandy brown hair, warm brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He had the soft look of someone who had never known real hardship, the kind of innocent face that belonged in a children's story rather than an assassin's crosshairs. Finn Royce, Torvin continued, consulting his own notes. Botanist, age 32, originally from the Terra Nova agricultural colonies, currently stationed on Verdania Prime working on some terraforming project. The client wants it to look like an accident, equipment malfunction, perhaps, or a fall in one of those jungle canyons. What did he do? Nyx asked, her voice barely above a whisper. It was the first words she had spoken, and they seemed to echo in the sudden hush that had fallen over their corner of the cantina. Torvin shrugged, his massive eyes blinking slowly. Does it matter? The credits are real, and the client's reputation is solid. Someone wants Finn Royce dead, and they're willing to pay handsomely to ensure it happens. That's all we need to know. It wasn't curiosity that made her ask. Nyx had killed targets for less information before. Something about the man's face in the hologram nagged at her, though she couldn't identify what. He looked gentle. In her line of work, she was accustomed to eliminating crime bosses, corrupt politicians, and rival assassins, people who had chosen a path that led inevitably to violence. This Finn Royce looked like he had never hurt anyone in his life. Timeline, she asked, pocketing the data pad. Flexible, but the client prefers it be completed within the next cycle. I've arranged transport to Verdania. Prime departure is in 6 hours from Docking Bay 94. Your usual fee has already been deposited in the Cayman Nebula account. Nyx stood, the movement fluid and predatory. Round them, conversations resumed in careful whispers, as if the patrons were afraid to breathe normally until she was gone. "Nix," Torvin called softly as she turned to leave. "Be careful on this one. Word is there are other interested parties. You might not be the only hunter in the woods." She paused, looking back at him with those unsettling crimson eyes. "There's always only one hunter, Torvin. The rest are just prey that haven't realized it yet." The journey to Verdania Prime took 3 days aboard a nondescript cargo hauler. Nix spent the time in meditation, preparing her mind for the task ahead. She reviewed the target's files, memorized his daily routines, and studied the layout of the research facility where he worked. By the time the ship dropped out of hyperspace above the lush green world, she had 17 different plans for eliminating Finn Royce, each one designed to look like a tragic accident. What she didn't expect was how the sight of Verdania Prime would affect her. The planet hung in space like a perfect emerald, its surface covered in vast forests and winding rivers. It was beautiful in a way that Umbros, with its twisted landscapes and perpetual gloom, had never been. For just a moment, staring out at that vibrant world, Nix felt something she hadn't experienced in years, a longing for something she couldn't name. She pushed the feeling aside as the transport descended toward the research station. Finn Royce was just another target, and Verdania Prime was just another world where someone would die. She was the Crimson Shadow, and shadows belonged in darkness, not in gardens under alien suns. But as the ship touched down and she gathered her equipment, Nix couldn't shake the feeling that this mission would be different. Something was waiting for her in those green forests, something that would change everything she thought she knew about herself. The hunt was about to begin. The Verdania Prime research station sprawled across a cleared plateau, like a collection of silver pearls scattered on green velvet. From her concealed position in the tree line, Nix watched the daily rhythms of the facility through high-powered scopes. Scientists in clean white coats moved between buildings, their conversations carried on the warm breeze that rustled through leaves. The size of dinner plates, everything about this place spoke of life, growth, and peaceful purpose, concepts that felt alien to someone who had spent her entire adult life dealing in death. She had been observing for 2 days, learning Finn Royce's patterns with the patience of a predator. He was remarkably predictable. Breakfast in the communal dining hall at 0700, morning briefings at 0800, fieldwork in the botanical gardens until 1300, lunch, then afternoon lab work until 1800. He ate dinner alone, reading from a tablet while occasionally pausing to jot notes in a physical notebook, an anachronism that somehow suited him. What struck her most was how he moved through his world, where others hurried between buildings with the focused intensity of busy professionals. Finn seemed to drift, stopping to examine a particularly interesting flower or to help a colleague struggling with equipment. He had steady hands that handled delicate seedlings with infinite care, and when he smiled, which he did often, it transformed his entire face, from merely pleasant to genuinely warm. On the 3rd morning, Nix made her move. She had chosen the greenhouse complex for the elimination. It was isolated from the main buildings, filled with potentially dangerous equipment, and had numerous exits that would allow her to vanish into the jungle afterward. The official report would read, "Tragic accident during routine plant cultivation. Subject appears to have slipped while operating the hydroponic suspension system, resulting in fatal trauma to the skull." The greenhouse was a marvel of engineering, a transparent dome that rose 3 stories above the forest floor. Inside, carefully controlled environments recreated the atmospheric conditions of a dozen different worlds. Terran roses grew beside Centauri crystal fruit trees, while Rigelian moss carpeted the walkways between raised growing beds. The air was warm and humid, filled with the green scent of growing things and the gentle hum of environmental processors. Nix found Finn exactly where her surveillance had predicted, in the tropical section, carefully transplanting seedlings from their starter pods into larger containers. He worked with complete focus, his tongue poking slightly from the corner of his mouth in concentration. She watched him for a moment from behind a towering fern, noting the way his hair caught the filtered sunlight streaming through the dome above. She could kill him now, a simple neck strike, quick and clean. He would be dead before he hit the ground, and she would be gone before anyone discovered the body. It would be the work of seconds, just another routine elimination in a career-built on efficient death. Instead, she found herself stepping into the open. Finn Royce, he looked up, startled but not alarmed. His brown eyes were even warmer in person, filled with a curiosity that held no trace of suspicion or fear. "Yes, that's me. Are you here about the pollination project? I wasn't expecting anyone from the xenobiology department until next week." Nix had prepared a cover story. She was a new researcher, recently transferred from another facility. The words died in her throat as she studied his face. There was something fundamentally decent about him, a quality she hadn't encountered in so long she had almost forgotten it existed. She began, then stopped. What was wrong with her? She was the Crimson Shadow, feared across 3 sectors. She had eliminated crime lords without blinking, had ended wars with a single well-placed shot. This should be the easiest contract of her career. "You look tired," Finn said, setting down his transplanting tool. "And you're sweating. The humidity in here can be overwhelming if you're not used to it. Would you like some tea?" The question was so unexpected, so utterly normal, that it completely derailed every plan she had made. "Tea, I keep a thermos here for long work sessions. It's nothing fancy, just chamomile with a bit of honey from the agricultural sector. But it's surprisingly refreshing." He was already moving toward a small workbench where personal items were scattered among scientific instruments. "I know. It sounds strange, drinking hot tea in a tropical greenhouse, but there's something about the ritual that helps me think." Nix watched, bemused, as he poured steaming liquid into 2 ceramic cups. The man she had been sent to kill was offering her refreshments. In 17 years of assassination work, this was definitely a first. "You still haven't told me your name," Finn said, offering her one of the cups. "Or which department you're from. Are you new to Verdania Prime?" She accepted the cup, noting how careful he was not to let their fingers touch, polite consideration rather than fear. The tea was exactly as he had described, simple, warm, comforting. "I'm Vera," she said, using one of her standard cover identities. "Vera Nash. I'm from the atmospheric analysis team." "Atmospheric analysis," he repeated thoughtfully. "So you work with Jenna's group?" "I didn't think they were expanding the team. The budget meetings have been pretty grim lately." He settled onto a lab stool, cradling his cup in both hands. "What's your specialty?" "Gas chromatography, spectral analysis." The lies came easily. She had memorized enough technical jargon to pass casual inspection. But as they talked, Nix found herself genuinely listening to his responses. Finn spoke about his work with an enthusiasm that was infectious. He described the delicate process of adapting Earth flora to alien soil compositions, the careful balance of nutrients and atmospheric gases needed to create sustainable ecosystems. "The goal isn't just to make things grow," he explained, his eyes lighting up with passion. "It's to create harmony. Each plant, each microorganism, each atmospheric component, they're all part of a larger symphony. When you get it right, when everything is in perfect balance, it's like watching a miracle unfold." "And when you get it wrong?" Nix asked, surprising herself with her genuine curiosity. "When you get it wrong, everything dies." His expression sobered slightly. "I've seen it happen. Entire ecosystems collapsing because someone miscalculated the pH balance or introduced an incompatible species. It's heartbreaking, but it's also educational. Every failure teaches you something about the delicate nature of life." They talked for nearly an hour. Finn showed her his current project, a hybrid flower that could grow in low-oxygen environments, designed for the mining colonies in the Outer Rim. He spoke about his childhood on the agricultural worlds, where he had learned to love growing things from his grandmother's garden. He asked about her work, her background, her thoughts on the research being conducted at the station, and through it all, Nix found herself forgetting why she was there. This wasn't a target sitting across from her. This was a man who had dedicated his life to nurturing growth in hostile environments, who spoke about plants the way poets spoke about love when he smiled, which he did often during their conversation. She felt something inside her chest that she couldn't identify. "I should probably get back to work," Finn said eventually, glancing at the chronometer on his wrist. "These seedlings won't transplant themselves." and I promised the survey team I'd have them ready for tomorrow's expedition. He stood, collecting their empty cups. It was wonderful talking with you, Vera. I hope we'll have chance to do this again soon. Yes, Nyx said, her voice sounding strange to her own ears. I'd like that. She left the greenhouse in a state of complete confusion. The mission was simple: eliminate Finn Royce. Instead, she had spent an hour drinking tea and discussing plant biology with a man who treated dangerous strangers with kindness and spoke about his work with the reverence most people reserve for religious experiences. That night, alone in her rented quarters in the nearby settlement, Nyx stared at the mission briefing displayed on her datapad. Finn's face smiled up at her from the holographic display, frozen in an official identification photo that captured none of the warmth she had seen in person. Someone wanted this gentle, passionate man dead, and they were paying an enormous sum to ensure it happened. For the first time in her career, she found herself questioning a contract. What could Finn Royce possibly have done to warrant the attention of someone wealthy enough to hire the Crimson Shadow? What discovery could a botanist make that would threaten anyone enough to justify murder? She had 48 hours before Torvid expected confirmation of the elimination. 48 hours to complete what should have been the simplest assignment of her career. As she powered down the datapad and prepared for sleep, Nyx made a decision that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. Tomorrow, she would return to the greenhouse, but instead of completing her mission, she was going to find out what Finn Royce had discovered that someone was so desperate to silence. The hunter had become something far more dangerous than a predator. She had become curious. Zara Kess stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office, 60 stories above the gleaming metropolis of New Geneva. The city sprawled below her like a circuit board come to life, its towers piercing the clouds while streams of air, traffic flowed between them in carefully orchestrated patterns. At 45, she was the youngest executive vice president in Helix Corporation's history, a woman who had clawed her way to the top through a combination of brilliant strategic thinking and absolute ruthlessness. Her reflection in the reinforced glass showed a striking figure. Platinum blonde hair pulled back in a severe chignon, Arctic blue eyes that seemed to calculate the worth of everything they saw, and a tailored suit that cost more than most people earned in a year. She was beautiful in the way that corporate power was beautiful, cold, untouchable, and infinitely dangerous. The soft chime of her personal communicator drew her attention away from the city below. She touched the device embedded behind her ear, and a holographic display materialized in the air before her. Report, she said without preamble. The figure that appeared was her information specialist, a nervous man named Crenshaw whose job was to monitor the progress of various corporate initiatives. His face was pale with anxiety. Ma'am, we have a problem with the Verdania situation. Zara's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Explain. The asset we contracted hasn't completed the assignment. It's been for days since the deadline, and there's been no confirmation of elimination. Our surveillance indicates the target is still very much alive. The Crimson Shadow missed a deadline. There was genuine surprise in her voice. Now, the assassin's reputation for efficiency was legendary. She had never failed to complete a contract once she accepted it. It gets worse, ma'am. Our monitoring systems show she's made repeated contact with the target, extended conversations, multiple meetings. She appears to have befriended him. Zara closed her eyes, feeling the familiar burn of a migraine starting behind her temples. This was exactly the kind of complication she couldn't afford right now. The Verdania project was worth billions to Helix Corporation, and Finn Royce's discovery threatened to derail everything they had worked toward. Pull up his file again, she commanded. The hologram shifted, displaying Finn's personnel record. There he was, smiling that insufferably innocent smile, completely unaware that his botanical research had stumbled onto something that could bring down one of the galaxy's most powerful corporations. He looked like exactly what he was: naive idealist who thought science existed to help people rather than generate profit. What exactly did our intelligence say he discovered? Zara asked, though she knew the answer by heart. His hybrid cultivation techniques have produced plant specimens that can not only survive but thrive in previously uninhabitable environments without any technological support systems. If his research is published, it would revolutionize terraforming and make our atmospheric processing patents obsolete overnight. We're looking at potential losses in the trillions. Zara nodded grimly. Helix Corporation had spent decades developing the complex, expensive systems that allowed human colonization of hostile worlds. Their atmospheric processors, environmental domes, and climate modification technologies were the foundation of their corporate empire. A simple botanical solution that could accomplish the same results would destroy their monopoly and send their stock price into freefall. Send a team, she decided. If the Crimson Shadow has gone soft, we'll handle this ourselves. I want a full tactical squad on Verdania Prime within 18 hours. Their orders are to eliminate both the target and the compromised asset. Make it look like a research accident, equipment malfunction, toxic gas leak, something that would kill everyone in the facility. Ma'am, Crenshaw said hesitantly, that's a lot of collateral damage. There are over 50 researchers at that station. Zara's smile was as cold as the void between stars. Then they should have chosen their colleagues more carefully. Send the team, Crenshaw, and make sure they understand that failure is not an option. The communication ended, leaving Zara alone with her reflection in the window. She felt no guilt about the death sentence she had just pronounced on 60 innocent people. In the corporate game, sentiment was a luxury she couldn't afford. Finn Royce had to die. His research had to be buried, and anyone who stood in the way of that objective was acceptable collateral damage. What she didn't know was that her carefully laid plans were about to encounter an obstacle. She hadn't accounted for a former assassin who had discovered something worth protecting. On Verdania Prime, Nyx was learning what it felt like to exist without constantly calculating kill angles and escape routes. For 3 days, she had been returning to the greenhouse under the pretense of research collaboration, and each conversation with Finn had revealed new layers to his character. He was patient with younger researchers, passionate about his work, and possessed of a gentle humor that made even the most mundane tasks seem enjoyable. This morning, she found him in the experimental section, carefully documenting the growth patterns of his hybrid plants. The specimens were remarkable where other flora would have withered in the harsh soil samples he was using. These plants seemed to actually flourish, their leaves a vibrant green that spoke of perfect health. The nutrient absorption rate is extraordinary, Finn said, showing her his latest measurements. These plants are somehow breaking down hostile soil components and converting them into exactly what they need for growth. It's like they're terraforming their own environment on a microscopic level. Nyx studied the data on his tablet, her mind racing. She had enough technical knowledge to understand the implications of what she was seeing. Finn, do you realize what this means? If these plants can adapt any environment to support Earth-compatible life, it would change everything. He finished, his eyes bright with excitement. No more atmospheric processors, no more environmental domes. We could seed hostile worlds with these plants and create breathable atmospheres naturally, sustainably. Think of the colonies that could be established, the worlds that could be opened for settlement. Think of the corporations that would lose trillions in obsolete technology, Nyx said quietly. Finn's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. I hadn't really considered the economic implications. I suppose some companies might see this as a threat to their business models. Before Nyx could respond, her enhanced hearing picked up the sound of approaching aircraft, military grade, moving fast and low. Her body tensed as instincts honed by years of survival kicked in. She grabbed Finn's arm, her grip urgent. We need to leave. Now. What? Why? Finn looked confused but not alarmed. If there's a shuttle coming in, they'll need to use the main landing pad. We're not in the way here. That's not a shuttle, Nyx said, pulling him toward the rear exit of the greenhouse. Those are assault craft, and they're heading straight for this facility. As if summoned by her words, the sound of weapons fire erupted from the direction of the main buildings. Emergency alarms began wailing, their harsh tones echoing through the dome. Through the transparent walls, Nyx could see black-clad figures, moving with military precision between the research buildings. I don't understand, Finn said, his face pale with shock. Who would attack a botanical research station? We're not involved in anything dangerous. You are now, Nyx said grimly. She led him through the rear section of the greenhouse, her mind calculating their options. The jungle beyond the facility would provide cover, but they would need supplies, and the attackers would have thermal imaging equipment. Vera, how do you know about military aircraft? Finn asked as they reached the emergency exit. You said you were in atmospheric analysis. Nyx paused, her hand on the door release. In a few seconds, they would be running for their lives through hostile terrain, and he would need to trust her completely. That trust would be impossible to maintain if she kept lying to him. My name isn't Vera Nash, she said, meeting his eyes. It's Nyx Valdris, and I was sent here to kill you. The words hung in the air between them like a physical barrier. Finn stared at her, his warm brown eyes searching her face for some sign that she was joking. When he found none, she saw the exact moment when understanding dawned, and with it, a hurt so profound it made her chest ache. You're the Crimson Shadow, he said quietly. I've heard the name whispered in the darker corners of the station. They say you're a ghost, a myth. I'm very real, Nyx replied. And the people shooting up your facility are here because I failed to complete my contract. Someone wants you dead, Finn, and they want it badly enough to commit mass murder to ensure it happens. Another explosion rocked the greenhouse, this one close enough to rattle the transparent walls. Through the chaos outside, Nyx could see armed figures moving methodically through the complex, eliminating anyone they encountered. Why didn't you? Finn asked, his voice barely audible above the alarms. Kill me, I mean. Nyx looked at this man who had shown her kindness without knowing who she was, who had shared his passion for creating life while she made her living dealing death. The answer was complex and terrifying and completely outside her experience. Because, she said, simply, someone who dedicates their life to nurture and grow. Marcus then watched the tactical feeds from Verdania Prime with growing satisfaction. His pale fingers steepled beneath his chin as he studied the destruction. Unfolding on the holographic displays, the research station was a blazing ruin, its gleaming domes shattered and blackened, but the primary objectives remained frustratingly alive. Through the thermal imaging, he could track the heat signatures moving through the dense jungle. His targets, still breathing, still running. He was a striking man in his early 30s, with prematurely silver hair and eyes the color of winter ice. Unlike Zara's ostentatious displays of wealth, Marcus preferred subtle elegance, perfectly tailored clothing in muted tones, expensive accessories that whispered rather than shouted their cost. He had been Zara's lieutenant for 3 years, learning her methods while carefully concealing his own ambitions. Status report, he said into his personal communicator, his voice carrying the crisp authority of someone born to command. Both primary targets escaped the initial strike, came the reply from the tactical team leader. We're tracking them through the jungle, but the canopy is interfering with our imaging systems. The botanist appears to be with an unidentified female. Our intelligence suggested he was working alone. Marcus's smile was razor thin. He knew exactly who the unidentified female was, and her presence complicated things in ways that Zara couldn't possibly understand. The Crimson Shadow's failure to complete her contract wasn't incompetence, it was something far more dangerous. It was conscience. Maintain pursuit, but do not engage directly, he ordered. I want them driven towards Sector 7. We have assets in position there. Understood, sir. What about the witness elimination protocol? Complete it. No survivors at the facility. Marcus ended the communication and settled back in his chair, considering his next move. He was operating from his private command center aboard the Helix, corporate flagship, a massive vessel that served as both mobile headquarters and statement of power. The room around him was a study in controlled luxury, real wood paneling from old Earth, artwork worth more than most planets' annual budgets, and technology so advanced it bordered on the mystical. What Zara didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that Marcus had been planning her downfall for months. The Verdania situation wasn't just about protecting corporate interests. It was about positioning himself to take control when the inevitable power vacuum opened. Zara was brilliant, ruthless, and utterly convinced of her own invincibility. Those traits had made her powerful, but they would also be her undoing. He activated another communication channel, this one heavily encrypted and routed through a dozen proxy servers. The figure that appeared in the hologram was Dr. Helena Cross, Helix Corporation's chief research officer, and the woman who had first identified the threat posed by Finn Royce's work. "Marcus," she said without preamble, "I'm monitoring the situation on Verdania Prime. The tactical strike was excessive." "Necessary," he corrected smoothly. "Zara's approach lacks subtlety, but it achieves results. The research facility has been eliminated, along with most of the personnel who might have been exposed to Royce's work." "Most," Dr. Cross emphasized. "The primary target is still alive, and now he's accompanied by one of the galaxy's most dangerous assassins. This situation is spiraling beyond our ability to control it." Marcus leaned forward, his expression intent. "Helena, I need you to understand something. This isn't spiraling, this is evolving exactly as I planned. Zara's heavy-handed tactics will soon attract attention from the Galactic Council when they begin investigating Helix Corporation's involvement in the massacre of 60 innocent researchers. She'll be the one answering uncomfortable questions, and you'll be positioned to step in as the reasonable alternative," Dr. Cross said, understanding dawning in her voice. "You're using this crisis to remove her from power. Zara has always believed that problems could be solved with sufficient application of force." Marcus replied, "It's made her effective in the short term, but short-sighted in the long term. The corporate landscape is changing, Helena. We need leaders who understand subtlety, who can navigate complex political waters without leaving a trail of bodies in their wake." Dr. Cross studied him through the hologram, her expression thoughtful. "What do you need from me?" "Royce's research data, all of it. I want complete files on his hybrid cultivation techniques, his growth acceleration methods, everything. And I want it done quietly, without Zara's knowledge. That information is classified at the highest levels. Accessing it would leave traces." "Let me worry about the traces," Marcus said. "Just get me the data. When this is over, when the dust settles, and the board of directors is looking for new leadership, I want to be the one who can offer them a solution instead of just another problem." The communication ended, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts and his plans. Through the vast windows of his command center, stars wheeled slowly past as the ship maintained its position in high orbit above Verdania Prime. Somewhere below, in the green hell of an alien jungle, the future of one of the galaxy's most powerful corporations was being decided by a failed assassin and a naive botanist who had no idea what forces they had set in motion. 3 days into their flight through the Verdanian wilderness, Nix was beginning to understand why Finn had dedicated his life to studying plant ecosystems. The jungle was a symphony of interconnected life, each species playing its part in a complex dance of survival and cooperation. Finn seemed to know exactly which fruits were safe to eat, which plants could purify water, and which ones to avoid. "Entirely, the crimson leaf vines," he said, pointing to a cluster of brilliant red foliage as they made their way along a game trail. "Beautiful, but their sap contains neurotoxins that can cause paralysis. The indigenous herbivores have learned to avoid them, which is why you'll often find them growing near water sources. They're nature's way of protecting the watershed." Nix found herself watching him as he spoke, noting the way his eyes lit up when he encountered something particularly interesting. Even running for their lives through hostile terrain, he couldn't help but be fascinated by the world around them. It was a quality she had never encountered in her previous life, genuine wonder untempered by fear or suspicion. "You're staring," Finn said softly, catching her attention. "I'm observing," she corrected, though she felt heat rise in her cheeks. "It's what I do." "And what are you observing?" She considered the question seriously. "I'm trying to understand how someone can maintain such optimism in the face of everything that's happened. Your life's work has been destroyed. People are hunting you. And you're talking about neurotoxic plants like you're giving a lecture to interested students." Finn paused on the trail, turning to face her fully, the afternoon light filtering through. The canopy cast everything in shades of green and gold, making his warm brown eyes seem to glow. "You want to know the truth? I'm terrified. I've never been shot at before, never had to run for my life. I keep expecting to wake up back in my lab and discover this has all been some elaborate nightmare. Then why aren't you falling apart? Because you're here, he said simply. Because someone who could have killed me chose not to. Because even though I know almost nothing about you, I trust you completely. He reached out, his fingers brushing against hers. Is that naive? Probably, Nyx admitted, but she didn't pull her hand away. I've done terrible things, Finn. I've killed people for money, destroyed lives because someone paid me to. You shouldn't trust me, but you didn't kill me, he said, his voice gentle but firm. When it mattered, when someone paid you to take my life, you chose something else. That tells me everything I need to know about who you really are. Before Nyx could respond, her enhanced hearing caught the sound of approaching aircraft. She pulled Finn into the shelter of a massive tree trunk, pressing her finger to her lips for silence. Through the canopy above, she could see the dark shapes of search drones, their scanning beams sweeping methodically through the jungle. They're using a grid pattern, she whispered. Systematic, professional. They'll find us eventually if we stay on the ground. There's a cave system about 2 kilometers north, Finn said quietly. I studied the geological surveys when I first arrived. The limestone formations create a natural labyrinth that extends for dozens of kilometers underground. Can you find it in the dark? I think so. The entrance is near a cluster of spiral bark trees. They're distinctive enough that I should be able to locate them even without daylight. They waited until the drones passed overhead, then began moving carefully through the underbrush. As they traveled, Nyx found herself stealing glances at Finn's profile. His admission that he trusted her had shaken something loose inside her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the humid jungle air. She was the Crimson Shadow, feared across 3 sectors, and this gentle botanist trusted her completely. The cave entrance, when they found it, was exactly as Finn had described, a narrow opening between towering trees, whose bark grew in distinctive spirals. The space beyond was dark and cool, with the sound of distant running water echoing from the depths. It's beautiful, Nyx said, surprised by the wonder in her own voice. Bioluminescent fungi provided patches of soft blue light, while crystal formations